The undermanned New York Giants look to avoid another embarrassing loss at home against the high-flying, well-rested Baltimore Ravens on Sunday. Can the Giants at least keep it competitive against a Ravens team that is still in the thick of the playoff hunt? We'll talk about that and more on today's special crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Ravens, coming your way next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL, written in all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Hello, everybody, and welcome on into Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Ravens. My name's Patricia Traina. I am the host of Locked On Giants, and he is Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. Two teams that are going in opposite directions. And on today's show, which, as you heard, is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, we're going to talk about the upcoming game, which basically for the Giants, they're just playing out the string, Kevin, and the Ravens, they are coming off the bye week, and they've got a lot on the line still as they look to sew up a playoffs berth.
Yeah, this to me is the game that the Ravens absolutely have to win and have to win it convincingly. Giants have some talent, but obviously a lot of their talent is either injured or probably still in college right now when you talk about what could happen in April or May for this Giants team. So you're right, Patricia, two teams going in opposite directions for sure, but there are still plenty of storylines we can talk about for both these clubs.
Absolutely. And we're going to kick things off with the well-rested, loaded Baltimore Ravens, who are looking, like I said, to sew up a playoff berth. The odds makers not really smiling on the Giants. Our friends over at FanDuel, who we'll hear from in a little later on, 16.5-point underdog the Giants are. That's up from, actually, I think it started at 14.5 points. But Kevin, let's talk about the Ravens. They come in well-rested. They have a very small injury report, only 5 guys listed, 2 of whom have been designated to return. But tell us, what are the key storylines you're looking for in this weekend's game?
Yeah, well, starting off on the offensive side of the ball, Lamar Jackson released a new perfume. Now, in terms of biggest storylines, of course, I'm just kidding. The perfume thing is real, but in terms of the biggest storyline, that is not it, of course. I think it's still Lamar Jackson, but talking about him, Baltimore's offense has struggled over the last 3 weeks. They had their bye week to reset, but in reality, it's going to be interesting because after the Eagles game, which the Ravens offense really started off fast and sputtered out really for the majority after the first quarter, Lamar was as animated, I think, as we've ever seen, or one of the most animated press conferences post-game he's ever had. And if you told him, Lamar, the Giants are in town, or you're traveling up to the Meadowlands in 2 hours or getting on that field, he would have been amped up and ready to go. That's how badly he wanted to just wash away the Philly game and go with this Giants game. And he said that again on Wednesday. He said, "Do you see me right now? Do you see how antsy I am?" Because one of the big things for Trisha is obviously Lamar Jackson's incredible both with his arm and with his legs. He's one of the best dual threat talents we've ever seen. And part of this year has been he hasn't necessarily run as much. And the other part of that is he hasn't necessarily run when there's been opportunities presented to him, where in the past, Lamar, 1 read, 2 read, 3 read, boom, he's off. But this year he's letting routes develop more, which I don't think is wrong. Like it's a big thing for Lamar to be able to do that. But I just think it's that balance between figuring out when is it time to just take off and take the green grass and when is it time to let those routes develop and get your guys involved. Lamar should get his guys involved, but I think what we're going to see starting off with this Giants game, Patricia, on offense is a much more willing Lamar Jackson to just take off and take what's in front of him as opposed to trying to float out in that pocket. Lamar has avoided the most sacks this season. And part of that is obviously because of his ability to just juke guys out and roll out. But I think Lamar, this offense, they've had a historic season. It's been a little difficult, as I mentioned, over the last month or so. But I think we're going to see this group come back with a vengeance, at least for Baltimore's sake. I hope they can against this Giants defense.
Kevin, a couple of storylines or things that I happened to notice when I was starting to do my research on the Ravens. Number one, it looks like you guys are having some struggles with Justin Tucker. And also, you guys, I think the Ravens suspended Deontay Johnson. And I'm just, with these, not that they're like major distractions, but they are, things that maybe weren't expected. But where do they stand on that? How big of a loss is Deontay Johnson's in the offense? And how concerned are you about the kicker? And I speak from experience on that because the Giants didn't have a healthy kicker and a reliable kicker, earlier in the season. And we all saw how that worked out.
Right. Well, I'll start with Deontay Johnson. His loss in the offense, it's not really one whatsoever because Baltimore really hasn't used him all that much. He has just 5 targets since coming over from Carolina, 1 catch in a Ravens uniform. And that's really where a lot of this displeasure has sparked from with Deontay. Is he was clearly unhappy with his role. He's in a contract year. Sure, he wants to, parlay this year into a decently sized contract. And that, based off the role, hasn't really happened. So Deontay refused to go into the Philadelphia game. Multiple attempts were apparently made to get him into the game. And this has honestly stemmed back ever since he got to Baltimore, where even after wins, he's been dejected in his locker. Lamar's apparently been over there trying to hype him up, but he's suspended for a game. So obviously not going to factor into this Giants game. We'll be back next week against Pittsburgh. And then for Justin Tucker, yeah, it's almost like seeing a hero fall. This is a guy that over the past decade plus, in my opinion, he's the greatest kicker of all time. He's had so many big game moments for the Ravens. So many wins that we've seen. I mean, you could go, Patricia, and Justin Tucker trots onto that field 30, 40, 50, 60 yards. You could go get your groceries, come back, the Ravens would have 3 points. You didn't even have to worry about it. But now even on the extra points, inside 50, you're almost kind of watching and leading with the ball to see if it's going to go in and kind of have that unfamiliar feeling of uncertainty whenever Justin Tucker trots out on that field. It's not a matter of his talent or his ability or his leg power. I mean, he still has it. He could still go and he could nail a 66-yarder like he did in Detroit with ease with that leg power. But it feels like whether it's a technique thing, he certainly is in his head right now. He's hooking all those balls to the left. And against Philadelphia, after he hooked 2 more to the left, he tried to overcorrect back to the right side, and it sailed on him pretty badly wide right. So Tucker was at the facility all week. There's concern about it for sure. But at this point in the season, I mean, Randy Bullock, who I know, you're familiar with Randy Bullock. He's probably the only option out there on the practice squad that, practice squad could come in and be an impact guy for them. But at this point, Baltimore is kind of between a rock and a hard place because at this point, you have to weigh what Justin Tucker has done over the course of his career versus who he is now or the player that he has become, because this has not just been a this year thing. Last year struggled immensely from 50 plus. So it's kind of been a decent decline. And when you talk about these games, the Ravens are losing by 2 points and Justin Tucker misses 2 field goals. You lose by 5 points and Justin Tucker misses 3 kicks. Those are games that Justin Tucker has a direct correlation to losing, and that's really tough.
And Kevin, I want to ask you about the injury report. Now, we mentioned it early on. You guys have 5 guys on the injury report. Rashad Bateman has a knee. He was listed as a full participant. Michael Pierce, nose tackle with a calf, full participant. And then, let's see, you have a Sanusi
Kane. Yeah.
Yes, Kane, hamstring, who did not participate. Otherwise, 2 other guys, TJ Tampa, cornerback, and Kyle Van Noy, also hamstring neck. Are there any concerns on your part about the availability of any of these guys?
The only one would be Sanusi Kane, who's a big special teams guy for them. Doesn't really get a lot of snaps in the defense, but he's kind of turned into one of their more reliable special teams players. He's the only one that at this point I'd be a little nervous about not playing. But other than that, the Ravens are in a very good situation currently, and knock on wood that continues over the course of the last 4 weeks of the season. They also, 2 of those players you mentioned, Patricia, with Michael Pierce and TJ Tampa, looks like they're on track to come off of injured reserve. Michael Pierce, one of their best run defenders. He's such a big guy in the middle of that defensive line. It takes multiple guys to push him off of his spot. And TJ Tampa, more of a rotational piece. I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back and he's back to the inactives list, but still good to have the depth there. For injury's sake, especially after what Baltimore's dealt with over the past 5, 10, however many years you want to go back. The past 2 seasons, I think in terms of season-ending injuries and guys having to miss big amounts of time, it's been a lot better for them over the past 2 seasons. And hopefully, their injury luck does not run out and it continues to be in their favor.
Send some of that luck over the Giants' way, because as we'll talk about coming up after the break, the Giants with 19 guys on the injury report. We'll talk about that and how that potentially affects what they're going to put on the field and why you're going to need a scorecard with all the players' names and numbers, because this roster is just not recognizable. So we're going to have that for you as we continue on Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Ravens. That's coming up right after this. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Feeling good about the Ravens being a 16.5-point favorite over the Giants? Or has the fact that the Giants lost their last 2 games by just 1 score or less make that point spread not a sure thing? Head on over to FanDuel, where you can get on that and other props, money lines, over-unders, and more. And don't forget to check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you in part by Game Time. If you're looking for those hard-to-get tickets to shows, concerts, and sporting events, look no further than to Game Time. Game Time makes finding the tickets you want faster and easier than ever before, and they offer seats at competitive pricing. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting the tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. I've used Game Time in the past to catch area concerts, and I've simply been amazed at the offerings and the competitive pricing that they offer. Game Time takes the guesswork out of ticket buying so that you are left with the seats you want at reasonable prices. You'll get clear images of your seat views, and you'll also get event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets elsewhere in the same section and row for less, Game Time will give you 110% of the difference. So go on and get the tickets you want. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Giants, Locked On Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens come to the Meadowlands to face the New York Giants, the banged-up New York Giants, team that I don't even recognize with all these injuries and these new faces and whatnot. I'm Patricia Traina, by the way, the host of Locked On Giants. He's Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. And Kevin, for the Giants, the biggest storyline, besides the fact that they have 19 guys on the injury report, is they're going to have another quarterback. You know, it's been a revolving door at quarterback. It's going to be Tommy Cutlets. Drew Lock, who started the last 2 games, is in a boot with a heel injury, did not practice on Wednesday. There's a tiny, tiny chance he'll be ready to play on Sunday, but if he is ready to play, it would be as the quarterback 2. So it's Tommy DeVito's show. And, you know, it's interesting. Tommy DeVito last year, it was about a year ago that he beat the Green Bay Packers in primetime and basically ruined the Giants' chances of getting a top flight quarterback in this draft because the Giants fell in the draft order. But here's the thing, you know, interestingly, as bad as the Giants have been, with Drew Lock under center, the last 2 games, the Giants have kept it close. They've only lost by 1 score or less. DeVito, in his first start, which came after the Giants benched Daniel Jones and subsequently sent him packing, the Giants got blown out. So, I mean, I don't know which Giant team is going to show up. The offense just has been bad all year long. The defense has struggled. No Dexter Lawrence. It doesn't look like Bobby Okereke, the inside linebacker, is going to play. I don't know if Deonte Banks, the starting cornerback, is going to play. They had a no-name defense last week that basically held Alvin Kamara to under 50 yards rushing. So I want to actually start there because this week, King Henry's coming to town. And, he's quite the load to bring down. I mean, he's going neck and neck with Saquon Barkley, former Giant in Philadelphia now, for the NFL rushing title. And I think that's going to be something to watch with Derrick Henry and how the Giants basically play him and stop him.
Yeah, and I think Dexter Lawrence not being there is a massive loss. And I know you already know that, Patricia. It's huge. But for this Ravens offensive line that can sometimes struggle with those more physical defensive front players or just more physical defensive lines in general, even defensive lines that have just one game record like a Dexter Lawrence can be, that's going to be helpful to Baltimore, and obviously it will hurt the Giants. I think when you look at Baltimore's offensive line and how they can open up holes for Derrick Henry against this Giants defense, it starts on the interior with guys like Patrick McCary, Tyler Linderbaum, and Daniel Faalele, which McCary and Faalele have had their fair share of good games and their fair share of bad games. Linderbaum's one of the best centers in the league, and he's not someone I have to go through the scouting report and worry about every week when talking about the Ravens offensive line. But the Baltimore's tackles have actually been very, very good this season. Ronnie Stanley actually cut off the last year of his contract to make this a contract year, bet on himself, and he has had a resurgent season after multiple injury-plagued years. And Roger Rosengarten, the rookie second-round pick, has stepped in to the right tackle job and has had a pretty phenomenal year, all things considered. So I think that this is going to be a game where Baltimore does try to establish things on the ground early. Maybe we'll see a couple of Lamar Jackson designed rushes, or maybe more than we've seen, like we talked a little bit about in the first part of the show. And it's going to be important for Baltimore to do that, because one of the things with this Ravens team, Patricia, is they do sometimes play down to competition. Where you look at this game on paper, you look at the Giants injury report, you look at where both teams are right now, and you look at that FanDuel 16.5-point spread, and you're like, man, that all adds up, right? But then you look at Baltimore's week 2 game against Gardner Minshew and the Las Vegas Raiders, and they lose that game. The Raiders have 2 wins on the year. One of them's against Baltimore. Jameis Winston, famous Jameis, absolutely decimates the Ravens and ruins a bunch of what would have been a great win. Now, the Ravens did a lot of that to themselves too. But when you talk about this Giants team, it's not like there's no talent. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is still there. Tyrone Tracy is one of my favorite up-and-coming running backs. And I know when you talk about the offense, Patricia, I wonder, because Baltimore has had some issues stopping clear-cut number 1 targets. Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, some of those players. Malik Neighbors is by far and away, there's no debate about it, he is the star of that offense. But I think the big thing is, can Tommy DeVito get him the ball as effectively and efficiently as he needs to? Because if he can't, Baltimore can just kind of key in on Malik Neighbors and force someone else, one of these other Giants pass catchers, to beat him.
Yeah, and we bring that up. Last year, the Giants beating the Baltimore Ravens 24-20 week 6. The problem with Tommy DeVito is that he still tends to hold the ball too long. The trade-off is that you don't see him taking the chances and putting the ball in harm's way. Hence, there's not as many turnovers as maybe you would see with Drew Lock. But, if you're holding onto the ball and just not getting it out to your receivers, that's a problem. And, look, the Ravens run game really concerns me, because the Giants run defense, even though, again, they shut down Alvin Kamara and the Saints last week, they held the Saints, as a matter of fact, to under 100 yards. First time since week 4 that they held an opponent to under 100 yards rushing. I'm still concerned about that, because if King Henry isn't getting the job done, you've got Lamar Jackson who's going to run, and Lamar did say he was going to run a little bit more this week. He promised his mother, I guess, that he was going to be a little bit more active in the run game. But, you mentioned Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors is banged up. He's dealing with he had the groin, and let me just see what the other injury was with him. The hip injury. That's the one he's listed on the injury report this week. But, he's a trooper. He told everybody in the locker room today, I'm going to play. He's going to push through it, and he's going to just, do what he does best. And surprisingly, last week with the injuries that he had, he still was able to go out there and he played just about all the snaps. So the key for the Giants is they got to get him involved a little bit sooner. For whatever reason, they've been waiting till, late second quarter, second half to get him involved. And I don't understand why that is. Maybe they're just testing or feeling out the defense to see, what they're going to do, but get him involved. And that's just been a big issue that I've had with the play calling of head coach Brian Dable, who is in his first year calling the plays for the Giants this season.
Yeah, and I think it's a big thing, especially with how the Ravens defense has responded over the last month or so. Obviously, their pass defense, their run defense is incredible. They're number one in the league, and that's been a big area of success for them. But they had a lot of struggles with their pass defense early in the season. That all kind of came to a head after the Ravens' narrow Thursday night victory win against the Bengals, where Jamar Chase went off, Joe Burrow went off. I mean, Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, that looked like the prime Kobe and Shaq duo back in the Lakers days against this Ravens defense. But there was a closed door, open forum meeting between the players and the coaches on defense after that loss. Or it was a win. It felt like a loss, but it was a win. And after that, despite the fact that Baltimore's lost 2 of these last 3 games, the pass defense has been, I believe it's number 1 in the league over the last 3 weeks, and they have turned a corner. They benched their $70 million man in Marcus Williams. They got rid of a veteran safety in Eddie Jackson, who was honestly unhappy with his role and didn't travel to Pittsburgh due to personal reasons. They said, all right, we don't need this distraction. You haven't been playing well anyway. You're out of here. And what we've seen is even Trey White coming in from the Rams, a trade deadline acquisition. Obviously, injuries have plagued him, and he's played really well, at least in his limited action. So being able to stop Malik Neighbors is the big part of it. But Patricia, you mentioned the turnovers and Tommy DeVito holding the ball for a little bit too long compared to Drew Lock and him maybe being a little more reckless, but able to push the ball. The Ravens are on a very high turnover defense this year. They haven't really forced a ton of turnovers. So if we're talking about Tommy DeVito and his low turnover style versus the Ravens' low turnover defense, I'm not saying there maybe aren't going to be a lot of sacks in this game. Hopefully Baltimore's pass rush can step up against the Giants' offensive line. But maybe there aren't going to be a lot of turnovers, and it's just going to kind of be you play straight up and see what happens.
All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about the keys to each team's victory. Don't go anywhere. This is Locked on Giants, Locked on Ravens crossover Thursday. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday between Locked on Giants, Locked on Ravens is sponsored by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. Start earning points on your rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our link so that they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning your rewards today. Again, that's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, everybody, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked on Giants, Locked on Ravens. I'm Patricia Traina of Locked on Giants. He is Kevin Oestreicher of Locked on Ravens. And this episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. And Kevin, let's talk about the keys to the game. I'm going to start with the Ravens since you guys are the visitors.
Yeah, I think first of all, Patricia, the Ravens have to show up. They have to show up and be ready to play. And Kyle Hamilton talked about that on Wednesday. And Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh, everybody's making a big deal about not looking too far ahead. These are professional football players of the New York Giants, and you can't overlook any team. Yes, the Giants are banged up. Yes, they haven't had the year that maybe they had hoped. But any team can beat you in the National Football League if you do not show up and take a team seriously. And Baltimore's fallen into that trap too many times over the course of really however far you want to go back. So for Baltimore, it's just about being locked in and understanding that this is an important game. And while it might not be the most important game remaining on their schedule, if you lose this game, Lamar Jackson, crazily enough, the big conversation point, and this is why, Patricia, I'm so sad the Giants cut Daniel Jones, is because he was one of the quarterbacks in the NFC who had managed to beat Lamar Jackson. And now we're not going to get that Lamar Jackson versus Daniel Jones game again. But just because there's no Daniel Jones, just because it's going to be Tommy DeVito, just because the Giants have all these injuries, you have to be able to show up. Second part, we talked about the Ravens run game. I know, Patricia, you expressed the concern about it. I think that using that, particularly making sure that you can work play action off of your run game, is going to be really important, because if you can establish a ground game early, if you're Baltimore, and force the Giants to either put more guys in the box to stop Derrick Henry or creep guys up at the line. If you're Lamar Jackson, you can fake the handoff to Derrick Henry, and if those linebackers are trying to cheat in to try to stop that, you can just plop the ball over their heads to a Mark Andrews or an Isaiah Likely. Or if they bring maybe a safety down in the box, you have some one-on-one opportunities potentially with Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman, who, as we mentioned, practiced in full. That could be a really big success point to keep the Giants defense on their toes and guessing, because if you run the ball effectively, it opens up the rest of your offense. If you don't, the play action is not going to work as effectively, because in this case, the Giants would be like, okay, yeah, right, you're faking it. You're not running the ball on us anyway. Why would you think we're going to do it again? So that's a big thing. And number 3, I kind of hinted at it and I talked about it. It is shut down Malik Neighbors. He is banged up, but he's still a heck of a player and one of the bright young talents at the position in this league. And for Baltimore, who, as we talked about, has struggled sometimes against defending that top premier option on a team, the game plan should be simple. It's shut down Malik Neighbors and let somebody else beat you. If someone else goes out there and goes 6 for 150 and 2 scores, you live with that, because it's not Malik Neighbors, because you understand what Malik Neighbors can do to your defense. So the Ravens aren't necessarily in the business of shadowing. They don't play matchups like that per se, but for Malik Neighbors, I'd expect them to try to throw some different things his way and hopefully shut him down, because I don't think necessarily there's stopping him, but I think if you can stop this Giants offense, that's going to involve shutting him down as best you can.
Well, as far as the Giants are concerned, I don't know. Can I say that, poking holes in the team buses of the Ravens as a key? Can I use that? I mean, seriously, this is a tough opponent. I mean, yeah, the Giants beat them last year, as you said, but, this is a healthy team. This is a rested team. This is a team that has a lot to play for. The Giants, they're playing for pride. Now, the good news is they have gone out there and they've given an effort. I don't think they've quit. But if you're looking for keys to the game, you got to start, obviously, with shutting down or limiting the run. I don't think you can shut down the Ravens' run game. Derrick Henry's going to get yards. The key is to not let him get, scores and scores of yards. And with that, also try to keep Lamar Jackson in check there. I think they'll probably assign a spy to him, I would think. But you know what? The Giants' defensive secondary, you were mentioning the safeties and whatnot, they've got some injuries as well. They just put Tyler Nubin, their second-round draft pick, starting safety. He's on IR. So we're looking at a duo of Dane Belton and Jason Pinnock. I suspect we'll probably see Isaiah Simmons get some snaps, maybe as a spy on Lamar Jackson, just to kind of keep him in check. But the Ravens, the run game against that run defense, which again is missing Dexter Lawrence, scares me. Even though last week the quote-unquote no-name running defensive line came in and played well, all things considered, this is a much, much more potent Ravens run offense, than what the Giants might have seen last week against the Saints. So that would be obviously my first concern, my first key. My second one, as you said, get Malik Neighbors involved, get him involved early. If he's going to play, there's absolutely no reason why he should be a decoy for the first, quarter, first half or whatever. Get him involved early, test that defense, especially if the Giants can get, the protection for Tommy DeVito. DeVito can, he doesn't have this as strong of an arm as maybe Drew Lock does, but give him an opportunity to get the ball in Malik Neighbors' hands. Let him get the ball down the field. See if you can't break open some plays and maybe generate some excitement. Get those chunk plays that have been missing to the for the offense. And then this is so elementary, but I have to bring it up. Play a clean game. the last 2 weeks, the Giants have racked up 25 penalties. You're not going to win if you're racking up 25 penalties. So that's 13 against Dallas. And then they had, I think, 12 last week. You're not going to win games like that. Okay. So you have to, you have to clean that stuff up because it just seemed like every time the Giants would get something started, they'd have a penalty and then they'd be pushed back. You can't have that. And I'm going to throw in one more thing for you, Kevin, because this has been a sticking point for me. Special teams, not so special. Whether it's a blocked field goal, whether it's a penalty that's calling back a touchdown return, whatever the case may be, it just seems like there's a different mistake every single week by the Giants special teams. And they're killing this team. They're killing the momentum. They're killing the field position. It's got to stop. So I know that's asking a lot, given that the Giants have a makeshift team here. But if they can do some of this stuff, maybe they keep it closer. Maybe those, that 16.5 point spread, maybe it just, it won't come to fruition.
Maybe, Patricia, the Giants and Ravens are a little more similar than we think because penalties have been a huge problem for the Ravens this year. If I had a fourth key, it would be no self-inflicted mistakes. Baltimore has averaged, I think still it's the most penalties in the league. Maybe it changed over the bye week. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they had triple-digit penalties after week 13. And I think this is a team that you're right. It's almost like, you get a first down run for 8 yards with Derrick Henry. Nope. Holding. Now you're 1st and 20. And it's a momentum killer. It kills your drives. And that's something that has plagued Baltimore far too often this season. So two sloppy teams, hopefully one can be less sloppy than the other, because if we might be in store for a flag fest if these two teams don't have good games in the penalty department, because Baltimore's had those games too, Patricia. 10 penalties, 12 penalties. It's been ugly. And special teams wise, there were a bunch of mistakes last week, not to mention Justin Tucker and what we talked about earlier in the show. So I think that this is going to be a game that I know a lot of people are predicting the Ravens blowout. I think for the Ravens to feel good about it, they have to dominate New York to kind of make a statement here. But, we don't know what happens till the clock hits 0 and the game happens. So I'm excited to see what happens.
As am I, although I think it's going to be another disappointing day for the Giants. I just can't pick them to win. Sorry, I can't do it. But anyway, that's going to do it for us here on this crossover edition of Locked On Giants, Locked On Ravens. I'm Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants. Make sure you tune into Locked On Giants. I'll have an episode for you tomorrow. He is Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens. He will have an episode for you tomorrow. And then, of course, we will both be back with our respective shows on Monday, talking about the takeaways. And hopefully, from the Giants' perspective, maybe it won't be so bad, but we'll see, obviously. So anyway, we want to thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day, or if you watch on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And of course, we want to send out a shout out to our everydayers and everybody who supports us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Kevin Oestreicher, I'm Patricia Traina. We will see you tomorrow, everybody.